Good morning, my dear students and friends. Welcome back to my series of lecture. And in this lecture, we will be talking about the obligation of the treaties on the part of the member countries. I'm Professor Urusilias, working in Department of Wildlife Sciences and teaching different subjects of the wildlife, including mammalogy, population, population biology, the techniques, and to undergraduate I'm teaching the environmental studies. So welcome back in the next lecture, that is the obligation of the treaties on the part of the member countries. So what are the obligation? If I am signing a treaty, what are the obligation? What I am supposed to do? We'll be discussing in this. Treaties, the cornerstone of wildlife conservation. Treaties are formal agreement between two or more sovereign states. They are the primary sources of international law, providing a framework for cooperation, dispute resolution, and the establishment of international laws. Treaties are the primary mechanism for creating new international law. They can establish rule governing various aspects of international relations such as trade, human rights, environmental protection, and security. And the treaty often contain provision for dispute settlement such as arbitration or adjudication. Treaties facilitate cooperation between states on a wide range of issues. Treaties can lend legitimacy to international action. When states act in accordance with the treaty, they are more likely to be seen as acting lawfully. Suppose if India is signing any treaties, India was the signatory of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So whatever laws was written, accordingly we have to develop our own national law. We have to implement the international policies, we have to do amendment, or we have to bring a law for the implementation of the international agreement. So with the signing of the CBD, we worked and we brought a national law. We worked on two aspects: national biodiversity strategy and action plan. As per the CBD, every nation who are the signatory had to make their own law for the implementation. So we started with the national biodiversity strategies and action plan, and finally we had Conservation of Biological Diversity Act 2002. So whatever we are agreeing upon at the international level for the implementation, we have to make our own law. So this is what we are talking in this lecture. So treaties can lend legitimacy to international action. When states act in accordance with treaty, they are more likely to be seen as acting lawfully. So obligation of treaties on the part of member country. What are the obligations? The obligations of member countries under international treaty are complex and multifaceted. Their obligations of treaties along with example and potential issues are as follows. For example, conservation and sustainable use. So member countries must develop and implement national plan to conserve and sustainable use of wildlife resources. For example, India has established numerous national parks and tiger reserves to protect wildlife habitat. This is the part of an international treaty. This is the implementation of an international treaty. And the issues lack of funding and infrastructure can hinder effective conservation effort. When we are signing an international treaty, means we are seeking the international cooperation. And that cooperation could be the monetary cooperation. India is the developing country and we need support in terms of not only in the techniques, in terms of finances also. So we have implemented whatever treaties we have signed. For example, India has established numerous national park and tiger reserve to protect wildlife habitat. However, lack of funding and infrastructure can hinder effective conservation effort. We are trying to conserve, but we are looking for the international cooperation in two terms, techniques and the finances. International trade regulation. Member countries must regulate the international trade in wildlife species to preserve their overexploitation. For example, CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. So, Appendix 1 prohibits the international trade of endangered species. This is what Appendix 1 says. Prohibits the international trade of endangered species in every country, every signatory country. So the illegal trade is prohibited, is banned. However, the issues are illegal wildlife trade remains a significant challenge due to corruption and organized crime. So, though we have signed the international convention on international trade in endangered species of wild flora and fauna, these CITES were signed by India to control the international trade. However, we are not very successful. We are not very successful because of the corruption and organized crime. Tiger is one of the example. Tiger, every part of the tiger is in demand and it is being sold in the international market. Many medicines, like for example, we have already discussed more than 400 medicines of the Chinese, of the China are having the product of tiger, from bone to urine. They are using every part of the tiger. So these kind of trade we are not able to stop. We are not able to control because of the corruption and organized crime. Cooperation and information sharing. Member countries must cooperate with each other to address wildlife conservation challenges. For example, member countries share data on wildlife population and trade trend. Issues, differences in national priorities and lack of trust can hinder cooperation. If one country needs some data, member countries share data on wildlife population and trade trend. However, there is no transparency in most of the signatory countries. They don't want to give the data because of the lack of the trust, and the lack of the trust hinder cooperation. Enforcement. Members countries must enforce their national law that implement international wildlife treaties. For example, customs officials inspect wildlife shipment to prevent illegal trade. Issues, corruption and inadequate resources can hamper enforcement efforts. Fifth is the public awareness and education. Member countries must raise public awareness about the importance of wildlife conservation. For example, government and non-government organizations conduct educational programs to promote wildlife conservation. Issues, lack of public awareness and support can hinder conservation efforts. We are all the time we are talking about the tiger conservation, but how many people know about the tiger, importance of the tiger in an ecosystem? So this, though we are creating the public awareness, but this is the issue with all the countries. We are talking about the tiger conservation, but the masses are unaware about the importance of the tiger in an ecosystem. They are ignorant, they do not know that is the apex species of an ecosystem, of an ecological pyramid. This is a predator species, is control the ecosystem. So this is the lacking in the masses, and that we have to do. And because of that, because of the public awareness and support, it hinders conservation effort. So public has to, if any kind of conservation involves the public, and we need the support of the public. So that is must for any kind of conservation. Specific obligation under different treaties. CITES, Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. CITES member countries must prohibit the trade in Appendix 1 species and regulate the trade in Appendix 2 and 3. We have already discussed that CITES There are 3 appendix. The whole CITES depends on the 3 appendix. Appendix 1, trade is not all the animals listed in appendix 1. Trade is not permitted. Appendix 2, in special circumstances, trade is permitted. Appendix 3 is that the species is protected at least in one country. So, trade is allowed provided it is must, it is some important issue for some knowledge based issue, don't only, and that time you have to produce the certificate of the origin. So, all the CITES 3 appendix need different kind of certification for the trade. For appendix 1, import, export, re-import permit is required. For appendix 2, import and re-import permit is required. For appendix 3, origin of the species certificate is required. So, these are the this is the CITES, and CITES is mainly for the control of the international trade of wild species of fauna and flora. Second is the Convention on Migratory Species, CMS. Member countries must take a step to conserve migratory species and their habitat. Convention on Migratory Species, because migratory species are coming from one country to another country. In India, for example, in India, we are receiving lots of migratory species during the winter time, wetland species during the winter time, because from Russia, because everything is snow covered and nothing is left for them to feed upon. So, they do migrate to India. So, if they are migrating from one country to another country, in between if there are countries, we need cooperation from that countries also, because that is the stopover of the birds, migratory birds, and they should be protected in those countries also. So, member countries must take a step to conserve migratory species and their habitat. Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, we have already discussed. Member countries must establish national biodiversity strategies and action plan, and India is very successful by establishing its national biodiversity strategy and action plan, and we have CBD Act 2002. So, to implement the international treaties, you have to make some amendment in your national laws. You have, so that you can implement the international obligations. So, there are challenges and issues in implementing treaties obligation: lack of political will, limited resources, corruption and organized crime, cultural differences. I will be taking up one by one. Lack of political will, that is bureaucratic consent is very important for any kind of implementation. So, these are the challenges. Some countries may not prioritize wildlife conservation due to other economic or political concern. Limited resources. Many countries lack the financial and human resources to implement their treaty obligation effective. Limited resources. Many countries lack the financial and human resources to implement their treaty obligation effectively. Corruption and organized crime. Illegal wildlife trade is often fueled by corruption and organized crime, making it difficult to combat. We do not have, India, there are lots of wildlife trade, we do not have enough staff. We have transboundary illegal poaching, illegal killing, trade. It's at the border area we have all these issues, and we do not have enough money and enough manpower. We are trying our level best to stop, to control, but however, because of the corruption and organized crime, we are not so successful as we should have been. And the next challenge is the cultural differences. Different countries may have different culture, perspective on wildlife and conservation. Strengthen enforcement. National government should invent an effective enforcement mechanism to combat illegal wildlife trade. Public awareness and education, that is must. I just said we are talking about the tiger, but masses do not know the importance of the tiger. Why tiger? Why we should conserve the tiger? Why we should conserve the biodiversity? Masses do not know the importance of the biodiversity. They say if I cut one tree, what will happen to the environment? They are not able to realize what is the harm to the environment by cutting one live tree. So public awareness and education is very, very important. Government and NGOs should conduct comprehensive public awareness and education campaign to promote wildlife conservation. Addressing cultural differences. If there are cultural differences, we must address. It is important to respect cultural differences and engage with local community to promote wildlife conservation. By addressing these challenges and issues, member countries can more effectively implement their obligation under international wildlife treaties and contribute to the conservation of biodiversity. So, these are the challenges and the issues. Challenges in fulfilling treaty obligation. Apart from the challenges and issues, there are challenges in fulfilling treaty obligation. Despite the importance of treaty obligation, state may face challenges in fulfilling them. These challenges can include domestic political pressure. International political consideration may sometimes lead state to prioritize domestic interaction over international obligation. Lack of resources. State may lack the resources or capacity to fully implement the treaty obligation. Dispute over interpretation. State may disagree over the interpretation of treaty provisions, leading to dispute and non-compliances. Sovereign concern. Some states may be reluctant to cede sovereignty to international institution or mechanism. Every country wants to have the sovereign right over their product, over their issues. They should have. If we are talking about the biological material, we should, biological material from India, the government of India should have the sovereign right over the biological product, whether it's rice, haldi, neem or whatever. We should have the right. So, the sovereignty concern is also important. Some states may be reluctant to cede sovereignty to international institution or mechanism. To address these challenges, it is essential for a state to prioritize treaty obligation, engage in dialogues and cooperation and strengthen international institution. So, to address these challenges, it is essential for state to prioritize treaty obligation. If we are signing any treaty, we should completely understand what are the obligations, what we have to sign, what we do not have to sign. And after fully understanding of the treaty, we should sign the treaty. Because there are lots of do's and don'ts. If we are agreeing upon, then only. So, because whatever we are signing, we have to implement for the successful implement, we have to modify, we have to bring to our national law. So, prioritize treaty obligation. States should prioritize the fulfillment of their treaty obligation and allocate sufficient resources to their implementation. If we are talking about the CBT or CITES or any international law, so the signatory nation should make it sure, they should prioritize the fulfillment of their treaty obligation, and the state should provide sufficient resources to the implementation. Resources could be technical, resources could be financial, resources could be anything for the implementation of the treaty. So, to avoid this dispute, we should think over and we should discuss within the nation the pro and causes of signing the treaties. We have to, if we are signing, we have to fulfill, we have to prioritize the fulfillment of their treaty obligation. And for that, the nation has to work for the implementation. The state has to provide all the resources in terms of funds, in terms of facility, in terms of technology. And the second is the engage in dialogue and cooperation. The state should engage in open dialogue and cooperation with other parties to resolve dispute and promote mutual understanding. There should be an open dialogue. We should discuss, engage in dialogues and cooperation. The state should engage in open dialogue and cooperation with other parties to resolve. If I am not able to resolve the dispute, we should seek the help of other nation to resolve the dispute and promote mutual understanding. This has to be resolved, then only a treaty is successful in a particular state. And the last is the strengthen international institutions. Strengthen international institution means international institution can play a crucial role in monitoring compliances with treaty obligation and providing support to state in need. So these three to address these challenges, it is essential for a state to prioritize treaty obligation, engage in dialogue and cooperation. Without dialogue and cooperation, you cannot resolve anything. Strengthen international institution. Whatever international institutions are there, international institution can play a crucial role in monitoring compliance with treaty obligation and providing support to state in need. So with this, I'll end up my slides, and thank you very much. Thank you very much for patience listening, and I will see you in my next class. Thank you.